So today I'll basically be going over an introduction to Illustrator and how we typically use it in this architecture school. Basically, I'll be showing you guys how to prepare a file for laser cutting and going through some of the other basic tools available in Illustrator that will allow you to produce a whole bunch of different media. So as an intro to this introduction, I'll just show you guys an example of a project produced using the three Adobe programs that we're going over today: Photoshop, Illustrator, and InDesign. So this was a group project we did in third year. Is it loading? Sorry. No, sorry, the computer's not happy. That's okay, we'll just leave it like that. Okay, so yeah, this was a project we produced in third year for a tech paper. So that was the render we went over in the Photoshop tutorial. So these three images were produced using a Rhino model, then taken through V-Ray to get a base render, and then manipulated in Photoshop. This drawing over here was again using a Rhino model, which we then extracted line drawings from and pulled them into Illustrator to add color, change line weights, add text, and so on. And then we compiled the entire page in InDesign. So the next tutorial will be InDesign, and it'll go over kind of how to use that. And the second page of the assignment was like this. So these drawings were produced in AutoCAD. So I think there's going to be a tutorial on that next week. And then the line weights and text was all added in Illustrator. So I hope that kind of gives you an overview of how you could use the programs that we're giving tutorials on to complete your assignments. So to begin, this is what you'll see when you open Illustrator. And I'll just go through how to set up a new file to begin with. So you go to File, New, or you can just type Control-N. And it'll bring up this new document menu. So what you want to do is rename your file. So I'll just rename it Illustrator Tutorial. Can't really see what I'm typing. And then you want to just select the size that you want. So we'll just leave it as A4. Or if you want a custom size, you can just type those dimensions in here. And usually, because we're in an architecture school, we'll use millimeters as our units, but there's a whole drop down menu. So if you're doing something for a screen size, then you can put that in pixels, and so on and so on. The next really important thing to remember is this color mode. So you just want to click that advanced arrow, and it'll bring up this color mode menu. And to prepare a file for laser cutting, you need to make sure that your file's in RGB mode. You can change that later, but it's probably just easier to make sure that all your files are in RGB. Cool, so now that's all done, just click OK, and it'll bring up your A4 size page. Cool, so basically you have three toolbars. You have this one along the left hand side, you have things up the top here, and then stuff running down the side here. So this top one will change depending on what tool you have selected. So what I'm going to show you now is how to do what we call an image trace, which is important in Illustrator because it allows you to turn raster information into vector information. Do you guys know what the difference between raster and vector is? So for those who don't know, raster images are made up of little pixels. So you just have all these squares, and then the more you zoom in, the more you can see these squares. Whereas vector information is basically the computer calculates like information between 2 points. So you kind of specify 2 points or like a number of points, and the computer will just continue to calculate that information. So you'll never lose definition on your lines or your text or anything like that. So that's kind of the difference between Illustrator and Photoshop. Photoshop works in raster mode, so you can edit photos really well, and it processes that information really well. Whereas Illustrator works with vector lines, so it processes that information really well. But if you start dragging images in, soon your files start to get really large. So you kind of want to keep in mind what ways the programs you're using like to be used in, so that you don't get crazy computer crashes and whatnot. So what we'll do for the image trace is just go and grab a photo. It can be anything. let's just drag in these penguins. Cool, and that places it into our scene. And we just want to resize it so it fits on our page. So if you hold down shift, it'll kind of keep that aspect ratio for you so it won't kind of throw things out of perspective. Cool. And what we want to do is select that image, make sure it's selected, and then up here you'll see image trace. And if you click this little arrow down here, it gives you a number of options for your image trace. So let's just go with a low fidelity photo trace. If you click that, it takes a little while to process. But basically you'll see that you end up with a new menu up here that will give you a lot of options for whatever's been traced here. So since we'll mainly be working with lines in Illustrator, we will just go with outlines, and it'll give you the outlines that it's traced. And then over here you can change the same settings as before, so you can change it to pick up 3 colors, for example, and it'll take a little while and it'll give you a different trace. So this is really about preference and you guys just like deciding how much information you want. Just play around with these settings, and let's just change it to something which has a little more in it. Cool. And then in order to actually get that information so you can manipulate it, you want to click expand, and it'll give you that. So right now, if you click on it, everything is kind of grouped together and you can't edit any one thing. So what you want to do is right click and click ungroup. And so now you should be able to select individual pieces and you can just move them around or do whatever you want with them. Cool. So the next thing we'll do is look at stroke and fill. So if you select everything, you can just drag to select everything. And over here, it gives you the color information for the lines that you have. So this one with the border, it tells you about the stroke color, so what's going around the lines. And then this over here will tell you about the fill color. So just because I want some black lines, you can either click that and it'll bring up this color menu on the side, or you can just double click here and it'll bring up this color menu. So that's black, click OK. Oh, it didn't quite change it. Cool. And then because I don't want any of this color infill, I'll just select this, which is none. And so now I'm left with a whole bunch of black lines. So now I'll just go through the different kinds of tools that we have on the site, the ones that we mainly use in Illustrator. So to zoom in, you can either push Control and the plus sign, or you can hold Alt and zoom with the scroll bar on the mouse. And to pan, just hold space and you'll get this little hand pop up and you can just drag around. Cool. So probably one of the most important tools to know about in Illustrator that are kind of hard to figure out on your own is the difference between these 2 arrows over here. So the black one is called the selection tool, and it allows you to pick stuff up in its entirety. So then you can just kind of move the shape around and it kind of retains its shape and you don't really mess with anything. The white arrow is called the direct selection tool, and so if you select this, you'll see all these little anchor points along the line. So the direct selection tool allows you to pick up any one of those anchor points and manipulate it. So if there's something wrong with your shape that you don't like, you can just kind of use this tool to change the lines however you would like. So I'll just put everything back where it was. And usually you'll kind of remain with this selection tool so you kind of don't mess anything up. Next is the text tool. So if you just click that, you can either click and just start typing, or you can make a text box by clicking that tool, dragging a text box, and then everything you type will kind of just be contained in there. And yeah, it'll give you an indication when when your text has gone outside that text box, and you can just drag to resize and whatnot. So when you select a text, you'll get this new menu up the top, which will give you all your text options. So just double click, select the text if you want to change. Here's the font, so you can change it to whatever you like. And that's just the font styles. And then here's the size of the font, so if you just want to make it bigger, whatever. Here you can change the opacity and the color of your font, etc, etc. Cool. And next up, I'll go over the line tool. And all of these tools over here, if you'll see there's a tiny little arrow in that corner. So if you hold down the mouse on any of them, it'll give you a whole bunch of other options that you can then use. So line tool is pretty simple. You just click, drag. To keep that line straight, I'm just holding down shift. But if you let go of shift, then you can kind of draw whatever line you like. Cool. And you'll see that sometimes when you draw a line, it doesn't come out with any colors. So just be careful of that, because if I select out, then my line will have disappeared. But it's still there. I just need to change the colors. Cool. And next is the shape tool, which is very similar. So if you hold down, you can see all the options there. So if I want to draw a rectangle, I can either just draw a rectangle like that, and you see that little box next to my cursor will show me the dimensions of that rectangle. Otherwise, if you just click anywhere on the canvas where you want your rectangle to be, then you can type in the dimensions that you want exactly there, and it'll draw the box for you. And that menu will retain the dimensions of the previous shape that you drew. So you'll see that these two rectangles are exactly the same. And that applies for all the different tools. If you just click anywhere, you can then specify the details of that shape and you'll get exactly what you want. Cool. So back to working with this fill and stroke menu. I think this is probably one of the most important things that you'll use in Illustrator, because I mean, if you want to just swap, you can hit the swap arrow over here, and then this is important for when you're preparing a file for laser cutting. So let's go ahead and prepare this entire file to be cut. Let's imagine that this artboard here is the size of the material that we want. So laser cutting comes with a whole bunch of rules. You need specific colors and line weights. And all these details can be found on the OML website, which is where the videos will be uploaded. And I think they're on these little pamphlets that you guys have as well. So for cut lines, what you need is a blue line. So if you open up this color menu by clicking color over here, you can select this little arrow here and just make sure that you're in RGB, and then select show options, and it'll come up with these three color sliders. So for a cut line, you need to drag this blue all the way to 255 and make sure that the fill of everything is, there's no fill, just the stroke. And then after that, you need to make sure that your line weight over here is 0.01. And just hit enter. And over here you can change the line type and the opacity as well. But for laser cutting, you just want a solid uniform line. So you'll notice that once I click out, because the line weight is so small, we can't see it anymore. So what you want to do if that happens is go to view and click preview on CPU. And so this won't be accurate, like the line weights won't be accurate on screen, but at least you can see what you're doing. So for cut lines, we just went over that you need blue lines. If you want to have something line engraved, you want to have, so let's say we want all this text to be engraved, we need to change the stroke color to green. So we'll pull the green slider up and the blue slider down, and so it'll be green. It's very hard to see right now. And then the last type of cut or engrave that you can do with a laser cutter is a raster engrave. So what they'll do is fill in this whole area with engraving. And so for this, you need to make sure that it's filled in and the color is red. Cool. So yeah, and then make sure that you either have no stroke or the stroke is also red. Otherwise, what you'll end up with, like for example here, if I change the fill to red, but I still have a blue outline. I'm not sure if you can see it. I still have a blue outline around this. So what the laser cutter will do is read that red information as a raster engrave, so engrave that, and then it'll cut out the square as well. So if you don't want that to happen, just make sure that you don't have a blue line around the outside. Cool. So the next thing we'll go over is layers in Illustrator, because that's quite important when you want to set up your file for laser cutting as well, just to make sure that the guys down at the laser cutter are sure of what you actually want to be cut or rastered. So let's just rename this layer by double clicking on the text. So let's put cut. If you double click on the text, you can rename the layer, but if you double click over here, it'll bring up your layer options, and you can change the color and all these kinds of settings. So to create a new layer, you just want to click this little page here. And let's say, because this is red, we'll just make this the raster engrave layer. And then we'll also make a line engrave layer. Cool. So now we have the problem of selecting the objects that we want to be in each layer. So the cool thing that Illustrator does is, let's say I selected this one object, and I want to select all the objects that are similar to this, so similar line weight or similar line color. You can go up to this menu here, and it says select similar objects. So this drop down arrow here, you can select what properties you want to be selected. So let's say stroke color, because I want all the blue lines. Then it'll go ahead and select all those blue lines for me, and I'll just make sure that all of them are on the cut layer by checking this square. So this square shows you what objects are selected and which layer they're in. So now if I want to select all the things for raster engraving, I'll go with fill color, and it'll show me the two red things. So what I want to do to change that layer is drag this little square into the desired layer, and it'll pop those objects onto that layer. Same with the line engrave, we'll do the same thing. Oh. Sorry. Text right now. Cool. So that's mainly all that you guys will need to know to set up these lines for laser cutting. And one last thing is your document settings and your material size. So you want to go up to document setup, and this will allow you at any time while you're working to change the units that you're working in. And if you select edit artboards, it allows you to go to this menu where you can change the size of this artboard here by changing those dimensions up there. So this is important because you want to have your artboard the same size as the material you want to get laser cut. So if I want to get a A4 sheet cut, then awesome. If not, let's say I want a larger sheet cut, then I'll just type in those dimensions and it'll change it for me. And just to save material, you kind of just want to make sure you're minimizing the material wastage. Just put everything in the corner. And another thing about this here is that you can make new artboards by either dragging and creating a new artboard, or I'll just delete that, or you can hold Alt, which is copy. You'll see those double arrows come up, and you can just drag and it'll duplicate everything that you've got on that previous artboard. Just escape to get out of there. Cool. So that's all you need to know. Now I'll just go over saving your file for laser cutting. So you want to go to File, Save, or Save As. Bring up your typical save menu. So let's just save it as, we'll change the file name. So when you submit a file for laser cutting, what you want to do is first type your UPI. So mine's jlim663. Put an underscore. The type of material that you want to get cut. So let's say in this case I want to get white card cut, and you want to put the thickness as well. So let's say it's just 3mm card. That's just so that the guys down at the laser cutter know what setting to put the laser at, so that it actually cuts through your material properly. And then you just click save. And what will happen is you'll get this Illustrator options menu, and this is not important if you're working on the same computer with the same version of Illustrator. But let's say you have a computer at home that has only got CS6 on it. You just want to make sure that you select the file type that you know you'll be working on. Otherwise, your CS6 version won't be able to open a CC version file. So for me, I work on CS6 on my laptop and I work on CC at uni, so I'll just save all my files to CS6 and just hit OK. And this warning menu will come up, but it shouldn't affect your file. And click OK. And you'll see that now that file's been renamed. And if you look on the back of those pamphlets, it should show you a page with other resources, and that will have the OML website where these tutorials will be uploaded, and a slideshow which goes through step by step everything that we did today. And also we'll have very specific and detailed guides on laser cutting and all the kind of pitfalls and all the details that you'll need to remember when you take your file down to get laser cut. So perhaps the first time you get something laser cut, just head over to that website, check out that laser cutting guide, and just have a read through it. If not, if you have any questions before you finish your file, you can always head up and meet us in the OML office and ask us, or you can just head straight down to the laser cutter, and the guys down there should be able to help you with your files.